it is really good to be back. I love this campus. I love it every time I come. I appreciate what you are doing here today. I thank Chancellor Katay for meeting me when I came in, and I want to thank the student leaders of our organizations, Rebecca Sterling and Arif Aziz of the Democratic Center. And I want to thank John Garamendi for telling you to register to vote, because otherwise this is just an excursion on a Sunday afternoon. Look, I want to do something that is sort of atypical maybe for political rallies. Something rather different from that last debate. Let's go back to facts. The people who ask questions in debates used to be called moderators, and they were supposed to like ring a bell or something, and somebody said something that wasn't so. And the bell never rang, so we're going to ring the bell today. The first thing I want to say is, if you look at this crowd and you look at these guys, you see what America is about. We have standing on the stage 4 people who believe for very different reasons that a country of we're all in this together works way better than a country of you're on your own. A country of shared prosperity with a growing middle class and where poor people have a dignified, honorable chance to work their way into it is way better than trickle down. A government that focuses on the future instead of giving away everything to the powerful in the present works better. That's what they believe. Why? Well, first you've got Mr. Garamendi, who was my Deputy Secretary of the Interior. He protected the environment for you when I was president. And his wife worked over at the Peace Corps to promote service around the world so people could see America's best face. Because we know in our party we have to be strong, but you can't kill, jail, or occupy all your enemies in an interdependent world. We need a world with more partners and fewer enemies. Before that, he was a Basque farmer with a big family, or a rancher. So I asked him about the price of cattle. I asked him about the price of alfalfa. We were talking, farmers are supposed to be self-reliant. There's not a farmer on earth that doesn't understand that when bad weather comes or bad prices come or natural disasters occur, we're all in this together works better than you're on your own. That's why John Garamendi's been a leader in the Congress and trying to bring manufacturing jobs back to America, and he knows there is no great manufacturing country on the face of the earth where the government and the private sector don't work together. That's what President Obama is doing. That's what John Garamendi is doing. Then you've got Dr. Bera. Volunteers for 17 years at free student-run clinics. The Chief Medical Officer of Sacramento County Public Health. A man who believes poor people deserve the same health care that the rest of us get. And believe there are plenty of people that need health care, so medical professionals ought to worry about giving it to them instead of trying to control women's choices. 2 pieces of the American dream. Then you've got Congressman McNerney. Now, one thing he didn't tell you is that for years and years, Long before it was fashionable, before he ran for Congress, he was in the wind turbine business, supporting wind energy. The United States ranks first or second in every major survey in the capacity to produce electricity from the sun and the wind. You want to know one big difference between the two presidential candidates? Barack Obama and the Congress supporting him have done more to take us from the back of the pack to the front of the pack in the production of solar and wind energy than any administration in history. And his opponent says we got to get rid of those tax credits for wind. We got to get rid of those tax credits for solar. I'd rather have a guy that worked more than 2 decades to prove that wind energy is good economics and good for the environment, and who understands if you want to save the planet, you can't ask people to turn out the lights. You have to make energy more efficient, and you have to make it cleaner, and you have to find a way to make it good economics. And it means something to me that he was inspired by his son to enter public service, because he wrote a bill to improve treatment for a very special group of our returning veterans. One of the great advances since the Vietnam War in medical care is in battlefield medicine. More and more and more people who once would have died live. But in the conflicts in both Iraq and Afghanistan, more and more of those who lived who once would have died were damaged by what in common parlance are called roadside bombs. Their brains were badly shaken, and now hundreds of thousands of these veterans have come home to us with traumatic brain injuries. Some of them are obvious and painfully paralyzing to them. Some of them are less obvious, but they still cause empowerment. We have a profound obligation to them. Whatever you thought about either one of those conflicts, every one of those young men and women has a right to begin their lives again. And this man has done more than anybody else to give them that chance. And then you have Jose Hernandez, who started out in a family of migrant farm workers, got all the way to graduate school, went to work at the Livermore National Lab, worked on nuclear nonproliferation in Russia, one of the great success stories of the last 20 years. And for every woman here, played a major role in developing what is called full-field digital mammography, which is another way of saying there's a lot more women who survive breast cancer today because of what he did. And when Mr. Romney talks about how dependent we all are, all of us Democrats, we don't believe in self-reliance, he tried not once, not twice, but 12 times until he was finally accepted as an astronaut and went into space to the space station for us. That is a long way. We don't need any lectures on self-reliance. What we need is a roadmap to a brighter future, and these guys will give it to you. I want you to vote for all of them. They represent America. Now, you can't vote for all of them at once. You got to be in one of their districts, but you get the point. I mean, even though the other guys are trying hard to keep you at home, I want you to vote just once. Now, what do I say that they represent the Democratic Party, and you do? Our future, our diversity, our focus on the future, our unwillingness to advance ourselves at the expense of others who, through no fault of their own, cannot defend themselves. And I want you to just think about this. This is what really matters. You know, sometimes I think the most popular line in my speech at the Democratic Convention in Charlotte was arithmetic. I was ready to stun, but arithmetic does help clear things up. For example, in the last 50 years, since 1961, 52 years now, since January of 61, the Republicans had the White House 28 years, we had the White House 24 years. 66 million private sector jobs have been created. What's the job score? Democrats 42, Republicans 24. President Obama has faced roadblock after roadblock after roadblock in the last 2 years, but thanks in no small measure to the initiatives adopted in the first 2 years of his presidency, since the beginning of 2011, or 2010, and basically 2 years and 9 months, the private economy has produced 5.3 million jobs. That is twice as many as were produced in the 7 years of the Bush administration after the first little recession in 2001 and before the crash. We won't count the crash against him, even if you don't. Obama wins 2-1. Why are we talking about going back to what didn't work in a different package? And then there are those other, like, pesky numbers. When President Obama's opponent said, well, it's time for a new approach, and I was governor of Massachusetts, and we had a great education system. I thought, you know, I was governor of Arkansas, and we were the #1 rice producer in America, but I didn't have anything to do with it. But what a governor's supposed to do is create jobs, right? He said that's what he's good at. So during that period of time, what does the arithmetic tell us? His state, with one of the finest technology bases in America, ranked 47th in job creation and 48th in new small business creation. Somehow that sort of escaped the ether because it was a fact. Then, there's this little matter of the budget. How can you say I was for $5 trillion in tax cuts? Well, I said it for 2 years, but how can you say it? Because now I say I'm not. Now, let me be fair here. What he really said was, we're going to start by cutting everybody's taxes 20%, but don't worry, I'll make it up by repealing deductions. Problem is, everybody that knows anything about the arithmetic says, if your income is high enough, you can take all the deductions away and you still get a big tax cut. So we're going to dig the debt hole deeper before we start pulling our way out of it. That was obscured in that debate. But I'll just tell you something. You can say, oh, well, Clinton says one thing, the Republicans say another. How are we supposed to know? I'll tell you how you can know. There is only one campaign, President Obama's, that actually has published a budget on the internet. You can go and look at it. They have been making promises for 2 long years. In that whack-a-mole Republican primary deal they did. Promise after promise after promise after promise all the way through their convention. And you can't find their budget on the internet. President Obama's opponent won't put it up. Why? Because the numbers won't add up. They hadn't figured it out yet, so they just keep sort of kicking the can down the road and say, I'm different, I'm different, I'm different, I'm different. And then there was that terribly inconvenient moment, numbers again, when for the first time in virtually 4 years, the unemployment rate finally dropped below 8% to 7.8%. And honestly, I never saw such a bunch of long faces in my life. One of their great champions, Jack Welch, the former head of GE, says, oh, they obviously cooked the numbers. Then a bunch of others said, oh, they obviously cooked the numbers. Now, the interesting thing is, when the unemployment rate was above 8%, every month when it came out, the same Republicans said, this is right up there with the commandments Moses brought down from Sinai. This is enshrined in stone and perfectly accurate and shows how terrible, terrible, terrible our president is. But oh, when it drops below 8%, all of a sudden, it's a colossal fraud. Now, I sympathize with the Republicans because they worked really hard on their number one priority, which was to keep unemployment above 8% until the election. And it's disappointing when you work hard for 3 years and 8 to 9 months on something, and you get it there, almost get there to the finish line, and poof, turns out the American people are so good in these energy policies and the rescue of the automobile industry and all these other things are working so well, you just can't quite get it done. And in spite of your finest efforts, which include 700,000 teachers, police officers, firefighters, and nurses who lost their jobs because the president's energy plan, jobs plan was not passed in the last year, in spite of all of it, it still went down below 8%. I understand where they're heartbroken, but it's good news for America, and it proves that a clean energy, modern economy, that a manufacturing economy with 500,000 new manufacturing jobs, 250,000 of them in the automobile industry, because of a restructuring plan which the Republican nominee opposed and opposes to this day. He said we should have let them go. It would have cost those 250,000 jobs plus 1 million more in the auto parts supply business, which explains why the auto companies that didn't get the help were for the legislation, because they know we're all in this together. It works a lot better than you're on your own. You need to support the president and these members of Congress. I just want to mention a couple of other things. I asked him on the way up here, I said, so what are they saying about you on television? And he said, oh, they're repeating Governor Romney's claim that we robbed Medicare of $716 billion. He said, it's all over the television. And they can do that because the Citizens United case hung a for sale sign on the seal of the United States of America. It was a disgrace. But there is the arithmetic. Here's what really happened, okay? Every so often, there's a group of doctors and other healthcare experts who review what we're paying for Medicare services, and they said this time, your inflation costs are way higher than they need to be because older people are doing a better job of prevention, and some of these programs like Medicare Advantage are working a little better than we thought. So you don't have to increase prices as much as you think. That's all that happened. So the president and his administration said, okay, that makes sense to us, and it will really help because then we can add 8 years to the life of the trust fund on Medicare. It'll last 8 years longer. And we can use the money to close the donut hole for our seniors and save them about $600 a year. And that will help us to afford to provide health insurance to people with pre-existing conditions, because if you don't subsidize that, insurance companies can't afford to provide it. Now, that's all that happened. Now, they've already started this, okay? They've already started this. So if it was as bad as they say, you would already see the sky falling. every senior in this crowd would be about to expire. You're laughing, but the point I'm making is serious. If it was what they say, the problems would be apparent. A quarter of the people on Medicare Advantage are going to lose their coverage, all this terrible stuff. So let's just look at what happened. They adopted it in 2010. And 2011, first of all, a record number of insurance companies asked to participate in the Medicare Advantage program, which Governor Romney said is going to cost 25% of the people their coverage because the insurance companies won't participate. They forgot to get the talking points. Turned out they were in business, and they looked at the arithmetic. And they decided, since they were still getting about 114% of what regular Medicare got, they'd keep on giving the service. Then, 17% increase in the number of people in the program. They didn't get the talking points. And then, most unbelievably of all, the co-pays and deductible, the price of being in it for ordinary people, dropped 16%. Now, I don't know about you, but I think when more companies want to provide a health service, when more people want to get into it, and when it costs them less to take advantage of it, that sounds like success to me, not disaster. Why, in the face of this evident truth, why do they keep running these ads? Follow the money. It's because of the Citizens United decision. They think if they outspend these people on this stage and every other member of Congress, no one will ever know the difference. Now that you know the difference, you can help us between now and Election Day. Make sure that every one of your parents and grandparents and friends, that they know the difference too. One of the most important things I think the President tried to do in this budget in the first 2 years is to ease the burdens on those of you who are trying to get a college education, to increase the Pell Grants, to extend the tax credits, and to change the federal student loan program so that you could borrow the money at a lower interest rate and pay it back as a low fixed percentage of your income for up to 20 years if you had to, that you would never have to drop out of college because of the cost, and you would never have to drop out of college because you were afraid you couldn't pay your loan, and you would never have to pick a job when you got out of college because it was necessary to make your loan payment. Your loan payment will now be determined by your salary, not the other way around. Is now being implemented. There are only 1 million of you who've chosen this option yet. But pretty soon, everybody will, because nothing else makes any sense. Unless you hit the lottery. Nothing else makes any sense. This is a huge deal. We have fallen from second in the world in the last 10 years to 16th in the percentage of our young people graduating from college, not going, graduating. We have record numbers of young people in college now. Look around. And you know as well as I do, you know your circumstances, you know your friends. A lot of it is pure and simple the cost and the fear that it can't be financed or the debt can never be repaid. This is a huge deal. So what do Governor Romney and the Republican Congress want to do? They want to repeal that. Are they doing it to save money? No. Guess what? The current system, over 10 years, cost $60 billion less than the old system. Why? Because when the government loans the money to a school, and they make the money to the eligible students directly, instead of subsidizing banks to do it, the interest rates are lower. And when you, like every previous generation of young Americans, when you can afford to repay your loans, you do it virtually every time, so the default rate drops and the taxpayers save money because making it possible for you to repay your loans and means more of you will do it. Now look, this is a huge deal. This is a huge deal. We got to get back in the future business. Getting back in the future business means more people going to and getting out of college. Not every job requires a college degree, but in the 21st century, most jobs will be created by people who have them. We need you to finish, to get out of here with your degree, to go into a modern economy, to find good jobs, to have a good future. So what are they going to do? They are going, if you give them the White House and the Congress, they're going to repeal President Obama's student loan reform, cost the taxpayers $60 billion more, which means they will cut the planned increases in Pell Grants, making it more difficult for a lot of you to go to school. This is a huge deal. No college student in America should pass up the chance to vote or go to the polls not knowing this. This one thing could change the future of America. So, there you go. Now, this is all just arithmetic. You can find it in their specific commitments, but you need an eyeglass because they try to say this just to the people who like all that red meat, and then they don't talk about it anywhere else. And they think if they leave it off of some website, it'll be all right. They can skate. And Citizens United gives the people who are going to benefit from all this unlimited access to the airwaves. But I'm telling you, I think people are smart enough to see through this. There's this popular phrase, the fog of war, how people get lost, and this is just fog. And there's a lot of it being spread around. The 4 people I'm on the stage with, 2 in Congress, 2 trying to get there, and each in their own way, they represent the American dream. They prove that a commitment to shared prosperity is better than trickle down, you're on your own. They prove that the best government works with the private economy to build new opportunities. And that the idea that the government is the enemy and you just got to gut it every time you turn around is wrong. That's why you ought to, and after all you've been through in California, that's why you ought to vote for Proposition 30 and against 32, too. And look, all I know is what works. And my life is not in politics now. Most of the time, if it weren't for all this craziness going on, I'd still be just doing my foundation and working around the world. All I know is what works. What works is when you don't cut people out because they happen to be poor and can't finance their own education. What works is when you don't constrain growth because of too much income inequality. What works is when you don't compromise the future because you stick your head in the ground about climate change. Instead, you take on global warming in a way that creates jobs and creates opportunity. What works is when you deal with the very real challenges of the budget deficit by doing things that will lower medical costs in the future in the public and the private sector, not trying to gut the Medicare program and using inflation as an excuse to do it. The cynical thing about this Medicare thing is it will be used, if they prevail, to create the crisis they've been telling us was coming, so they will give people money coming and going. Don't fall for it. It's your future. It's your life. The 4 people on the stage with me are dedicated to your future. The president is dedicated to your future. They know that we can build a new American prosperity in the 21st century, but it's a long, hard road, and we have to do the smart thing. We have to do it together. It all begins with you. God bless you, and thank you.